September fog drifted over the ground, clinging to the crowns of trees and obscuring the outlines of the hopelessly outdated cars parked along the main street. The town, as if bogged down in time, woke up with the same familiar creak it had been making for the last 20 years, ever since the pulp mill closed, taking with it not only jobs but also the last hope for a better life. The Boathouse Motel on the outskirts of town was once a vacation spot for tourists who came to the nearby lake. Now its peeling sign with a stylized boat was barely illuminated at night, and its customers were either truckers tired of the monotonous scenery of Highway 84 or locals looking for a brief respite from the dullness of everyday life. Frank Dawson, a short balding man with perpetually slumped shoulders, had been the receptionist here for 15 years. When he discovered the unlocked door to room 3 at 7:30 in the morning and a body with a pool of blood pouring out from beneath it, his first thought had been, "Oh shit, this is the last thing we need." It wasn't until later that the real fear came. When Detective Monica Baxter arrived on the scene, the fog had already begun to clear, and the sun's rays illuminated the dust clouds in the old motel room. Monica was 42 years old, and 20 of those years had been with the Millview Police Department. Tall, with sharp features and a perpetual frown, she didn't inspire much sympathy. She hadn't sought it, though. After her divorce 4 years ago, she'd decided it was enough to be just a good cop and a mother to her 15-year-old son, Jason. The body lay between the bed and the window. The girl had fallen on her back, but her head was turned to the side, as if she'd tried to turn away from something at the last moment. The shards of a table lamp were visible all around, and a dark blood stain was spreading across the white carpet. Monica leaned over the body, holding her breath. "Veronica Higgs," she said, feeling something inside her clench. 27 years old. Monica knew her personally. In a small town like Millview, everyone knew each other. If not knew each other, at least saw each other. Veronica worked as a waitress at the Bluebird, the only cafe in town that the locals considered decent. She was the kind of girl who always smiled a little wider than necessary and looked a little farther away from the horizon. In Millview, they called them flyers. They always had one foot out of town, always ready to snap out of it and go wherever they wanted to go. Time of death was sometime between 23 and 2 o'clock in the morning. The coroner, the elderly Dr. Peterson, said as he pulled away from the body, "A very strong blow with a heavy object to the temple, probably with this very lamp." Monica nodded and stepped out of the room into the fresh air. Frank Dawson paced nervously outside the motel office, wringing his hands and looking even more lost than usual. "I've already given my statement to Officer Johnson," he muttered as he saw Monica approaching. "I know, Mr. Dawson, but I want to hear it from you personally. Anything unusual last night?" Frank rubbed his neck and wrinkled his nose as if every thought caused him physical pain. "There was a red Ford here last night, an old one with a dent in the bumper. It looked a lot like Thomas Kelly's car." Monica tensed up. Thomas Kelly was the kind of man the women in town whispered about with equal amounts of admiration and contempt. A talented mechanic in his youth, now a car service worker with his hands in machine oil and the smell of whiskey in the evenings. "Are you sure it was his car?" "I can't say for sure, but it's the same one." Frank hesitated. "You know, Miss Veronica was here quite often, and not always alone." "With Thomas?" He shrugged. "I'm not one to look in other people's windows, Detective." "Yes, you are," Monica thought, but just nodded, making a note in her notebook. Doug's auto service smelled of rubber and motor oil. Through the open garage door, you could see an old Chevy jacked up and the bent figure of a mechanic rummaging through its innards. The sounds of country music from a battered radio blared throughout the room. Doug Simmons stood behind the counter, looking over some papers. He was a stocky man in his 50s with faded blue eyes and skin that looked like beef jerky from constant exposure to the sun. "Monica," he nodded at her, showing little surprise. "Is something wrong?" "Where's Thomas?" she asked, looking around the room. Doug frowned. "He didn't show up today. Called in sick. Was he here yesterday?" Doug hesitated for a moment, then grudgingly answered, "Until noon." Then he excused himself. Said his daughter was having some trouble at school. Monica knew that Thomas and Allison Kelly had a daughter, Sarah, 13 years old. A quiet girl with her mother's sad eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. "How often does he get such absences?" Doug sighed. Look, Monica, I've known Thomas since he was a kid. He's a good guy. He's just messed up. He's had a rough last year. He and Allison fight all the time. About Veronica Higgs? His face twitched, and Monica realized she was right. I stay out of other people's business, he said, but his voice sounded unconvincing. Veronica's dead, Doug. Murdered last night at the boathouse. And witnesses saw a car that looked like Thomas's. Doug's face froze like a plaster mask. Shit, was all he said. Monica watched his reaction intently. The news seemed to shock him, but there was something else to it. Something she couldn't quite figure out yet. If you remember anything important, give me a call, she said, leaving her card on the counter. As she left the auto shop, she caught a glimpse of the man working on the car. He looked up, and their gazes met. Something in his eyes made her wary, more like instinct than actual suspicion. The Food and Go supermarket was the heart of Millview, the place where all the city's rumors and news gathered. Allison Kelly had been working checkout number 3 for 9 years, ever since the elementary school where she taught art had closed. She was the kind of woman whose beauty you only notice at second or third glance, quiet, with soft brown hair pulled back into a careless ponytail and tired brown eyes. Once full of life, she now looked like a shadow of herself. Monica waited for Allison to finish serving the customers. Finally, she handed the last woman a receipt and a bag of groceries. When she saw Monica, she flinched slightly. "Detective Baxter," she said with a strained smile. "What can I do for you?" "I need to ask you a few questions, Mrs. Kelly. Is there some place we can talk in private?" 5 minutes later, they were sitting in the cramped staff lounge. Allison nervously twirled a paper cup of water from the water cooler. "Veronica Higgs has been murdered," Monica said without preamble, watching the woman's reaction. Allison froze. Something flashed in her eyes. Fright? Surprise? Relief? But she quickly got over herself. "Oh my God," she whispered. "How did this happen?" "Last night at the Boathouse Motel. Witnesses saw a car that looked like your husband's." Allison swallowed hard, but her voice remained firm. "Thomas was home with me all night. We watched TV and went to bed around 11. Monica scrutinized Allison's face, looking for signs of lying. They were there, the barely perceptible twitch of an eyelid, the overly direct gaze, the tense shoulders. But for now, they were only suspicions. She had no concrete evidence against Allison or Thomas. "Were you aware of your husband's connection to Veronica?" Allison lowered her eyes. "Millview's a small town, Detective. Everyone here knows everything about everyone or thinks they do." "That doesn't answer my question." "I've heard the rumors," Allison finally admitted. But Thomas denied it. "And you believed him?" Allison's eyes flashed with a pain so sharp it took Monica's breath away. "We've been married 15 years, Detective. We have a daughter. Sometimes faith is all you have left." Monica nodded, making notes in her notebook. She didn't believe a word Allison said, but it was too early to press on yet. "We need to gather more information first." "If you remember anything, give me a call," she said, leaving her business card behind. "And tell your husband I'd like to talk to him." As she left the supermarket, Monica could feel Allison's eyes on her, heavy, intense. What was behind those tired eyes? That evening, Monica made lasagna, the only dish her son Jason ate without complaint. While she sliced tomatoes for the salad, Jason sat at the kitchen table, staring intently into his phone. "How was your day?" she asked, knowing she was going to get the standard, "Okay, everyone's talking about Veronica," he answered abruptly, looking up. "Is it true she was murdered?" Monica sighed. Of course, the news had already spread around town. "Yes, it's true." "Was it because of Mr. Kelly?" Jason asked, and Monica froze with the knife in her hand. "What makes you think that?" Jason shrugged, turning back to the phone. "Everyone at school knows they've been dating. Sarah skipped class yesterday, said she was sick, but Maggie saw her crying in the bathroom." Monica slowly put the knife down. Sarah Kelly, Thomas and Allison's daughter, was 2 years younger than Jason, but they went to the same school. What else did the school say? That Mr. Kelly was going to leave his wife for Veronica. They were supposedly planning to leave town. Monica wondered. If these rumors had reached the children, then Thomas and Veronica's relationship wasn't such a secret. Allison knew all too well. What was it like to work at the supermarket every day, smiling at people who whispered about your husband's affairs behind your back? Late that night, after Jason had gone to bed, Monica got a call from Officer Johnson. "Found Veronica's purse in the dumpster behind the motel," he reported. "There's a note in it. I think you should take a look at it." 20 minutes later, Monica was at the station looking at what she'd found. A purse, cheap imitation leather with worn corners, lipstick, keys, a tattered wallet with $37 and a few credit cards, and a note on a piece of paper torn from a notepad. "Meet me tonight at 9. I've made up my mind. Take only the essentials, we'll buy the rest locally. We'll be in Portland by the ocean in a week. I promise you'll never have to serve coffee in this dump again. T." Monica reread the note several times. T. Thomas, obviously. So the rumors weren't lying. They really were planning to run away together. Something about this story didn't add up. If they were planning to leave, why meet at the motel? Why not leave right away? And most importantly, what had happened that night in room 3 of the Boathouse Motel that turned plans for a new life into a pool of blood on the floor? Monica put the physical evidence back in the bag and rubbed her eyes tiredly. The first day of the investigation was coming to an end, but she was still far from a clue. One thing she knew for sure, though, was that someone in this town was lying, and she was going to find out who, no matter what it took. The morning light reluctantly filtered through the blinds in Monica Baxter's office. The detective had been sitting at her desk for an hour now, spreading out crime scene photos, notes, and witness statements in front of her. The coffee in her mug had long since gone cold, but she hardly noticed it, immersed in thought. Something about this case didn't add up. On the one hand, everything looked simple and banal: love triangle, jealousy, murder in a state of passion. But there was something else, some detail that eluded attention. Monica reread Allison Kelly's testimony again. "Thomas was home with me all night." Was it true? And if not, where had he been at the time of Veronica's murder? A phone call snapped her out of her musings. "Baxter," she answered briefly. "This is Officer Pierce. We checked out Thomas Kelly's alibi. The neighbors can't confirm whether or not he left the house the night of the murder. But here's something interesting. A Mrs. Jenkins from the next street over said she saw a woman who looked like Allison Kelly get into a car around 10 o'clock at night." Monica frowned. "Thank you, Pierce. Check the footage from the gas station cameras at the gas station on the way out of town." Hanging up the phone, she tapped her pencil on the desk thoughtfully. Allison had lied about being home all night? But why? An hour later, Monica was already sitting in the Bluebird Cafe across from Lori Martinez, the waitress who, according to the cafe owner, was Veronica's best friend. Lori looked haggard, her eyes swollen with tears. She nervously twirled her coffee cup in her hands, avoiding the detective's direct gaze. "I still can't believe it," she said quietly. "Yesterday we were working together, and today she's gone." "Tell me about Veronica," Monica asked softly. "What was she like?" Lori took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She was bright. You know, the kind of person who seemed to glow from the inside out, always with a smile, always with a joke. But the last 6 months, she changed. Because of Thomas Kelly? Lori flinched as if she'd been hit, and finally looked up at Monica. They'd been dating for about 7 months. I told her right away that it was a bad idea to get involved with a married man in a small town like this. But she wouldn't listen. Said it was true love, that he'd leave his wife, that they'd leave here together. Monica wrote down every word in her notebook, trying not to miss important details. Had he promised her that? Leave together? Veronica showed me printouts of apartments in Portland. Lori grinned bitterly. They were planning to move there next week. She'd even written a letter of resignation. Was Thomas really going to leave Allison? Lori folded her hands on the table as if defending herself. Veronica believed it. And I don't know. Men often promise more than they can deliver. There was a pain in Lori's voice that went beyond mere sympathy for her friend. Monica thought that perhaps she had had her own bitter experience of such a relationship. Had Veronica said anything about trouble? Maybe someone had threatened her? Did Allison know about her and Thomas? Lori tensed when Monica mentioned Allison. Veronica assumed that Allison was guessing but didn't want to admit it to herself. But for the past couple weeks, she'd been scared. She said she could feel someone's eyes on her, that someone was watching her. As she left the cafe, Monica mentally summarized the information she'd received. So, Thomas and Veronica's affair lasted more than 6 months. They were planning to leave for Portland the following week, and Veronica felt she was being followed. Doug's auto service greeted Monica with the smell of machine oil and the muffled sound of the radio. This time Thomas was there, tinkering with the engine of an old Chevy, completely absorbed in his work. When he noticed Monica, he tensed up but continued his work, pretending not to see her. Doug Simmons came out of his office with a mug of coffee in his hand. "Monica," he nodded. "What can I do for you?" "I need to talk to you. Alone," she added, glancing at Thomas, whom she would talk to later. The small office smelled of cigarette smoke, though Doug himself had quit smoking 3 years ago after a heart attack. He sank into the creaky chair behind his desk and gestured for Monica to sit across from him. "I've told you everything," he began, not waiting for a question. "It's a bloody sad story, but I don't know any more than that." "Tell me about Thomas and Allison," Monica asked. "You know them better than anyone." Doug rubbed his face with his palms as if trying to wipe away his fatigue. "I've known Thomas since I was a kid, like I said," he began slowly. "I remember the way he lit up when he met Allison. She wasn't from around here, came to teach the kids to draw. They seemed like the perfect couple." "What changed?" "Life," Doug shrugged. "The mill closed, half the town was out of work. Allison lost her place at school, they were in debt. Thomas took overtime, but it wasn't enough. They started fighting, more and more often and louder." Monica remembered one time about a year ago, when she'd had to make a call to Kelly's house because of noise complaints from neighbors. Thomas had been drunk at the time, and Allison, eyes red with tears, had assured her that everything was fine. "And then Veronica showed up," Doug continued, averting his gaze. "Young, beautiful, unburdened by her problems. She looked at Thomas with an admiration he hadn't seen in Allison's eyes in a long time. Are you making excuses for him?" Doug wrinkled his nose. "No, but I understand him. He was unhappy, Monica. Allison wasn't either. It was like they were stuck in this life and couldn't get out. And Veronica, she gave him hope." "For what? An escape from responsibility?" "A new life," Doug answered quietly. Thomas had saved something. Not much, but enough to make a fresh start. At least that's what he thought. Monica wrote it down in her notebook. So Thomas had the money to run away with Veronica. Where would an auto mechanic with financial problems get it from? The question remained. Where was Thomas the night of the murder? Doug was silent for a moment, clearly struggling internally. "I don't know," he finally answered. "I really don't." Monica stood up, getting ready to leave. "If you think of anything, call me. And one more thing, Doug. You're a good friend. But don't let friendship get in the way of justice." As she left the office, she caught a glimpse of Thomas quickly turning away from the window where he'd apparently been eavesdropping on their conversation. Let him be nervous, afraid, and it would be easier to get him later at the interrogation. Officer Pierce was waiting for Monica at the police station with the printouts from the surveillance cameras. "Here, look," he pointed to an image. "That's a gas station on the highway, 2315. See that silver Honda?" Monica stared at the grainy black and white image. Indeed, a car belonging to Allison Kelly was pulling into the gas station. She couldn't see the driver, but there was no doubt Allison had lied about being home all night. "That's not all," Pierce continued, showing the next picture. In 40 minutes, the car was heading back to the city. Monica tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. The gas station was only a 10-minute drive from the Boathouse Motel. It was more than enough time to drive there, make the kill, and drive back. "Thanks, Pierce. It's time to have a serious talk with Thomas Kelly." She found him in the city park, on a bench by the pond. The fall wind was whipping ripples and dry leaves across the water. Thomas stared blankly at the water, and only when Monica sat down beside him did he flinch and turn toward her. "Detective Baxter," he said hoarsely. "I thought you'd find me." "You didn't want to talk in front of Doug?" He grinned bitterly. He knew too much already. Monica decided to go straight. I know about your relationship with Veronica. I know you were planning to leave for Portland next week. And I know that your wife most likely lied about where you were the night of her murder and where she was herself. Thomas turned sharply toward her, fear flashing in his eyes. I didn't kill her. I swear it. Then tell me where you were. The truth, Thomas? He lowered his head, clenching his hands into fists so hard his knuckles turned white. I was with Veronica, yes. We met at the motel around 8 p.m. We talked about our plans, about moving, but then we had a fight. She wanted to leave now for some reason, and I said I needed a few more days to work things out with Allison and Sarah. I couldn't just disappear without telling my daughter. Besides, Veronica and I said we needed time. I don't know what changed. And then what happened? Veronica got angry. She said I'd never leave Allison, that I was a coward, that she was tired of waiting. Thomas ran his hands through his hair. We yelled at each other, and then I left, around 9 o'clock. Went to Rick Johnson's, my buddy. We drank until 2 in the morning, and then I wanted to go and talk to her again. But I didn't have time. Can Rick confirm that? Yes, of course. Thomas nodded hastily. Ask him. And you left Veronica alone in the motel? Yes. She was furious, but alive and well. I don't know what happened afterward, I swear. Monica watched him carefully. Thomas looked sincere in his pain and confusion, but that didn't prove anything yet. Did Allison know about your plans? Thomas looked at her shocked. No, I thought she didn't. We were being careful. But your daughter knew. Sarah? He turned pale. What do you mean? Sarah skipped school the day of the murder. Cried in the bathroom. The kids say she knew about you and Veronica. Thomas covered his face with his hands. Oh my God. I didn't want her to find out. Not like this. Monica gave him a moment to gather his thoughts, then continued. Allison's car was spotted at the gas station near the motel around the time of the murder. She knew you were there, wanted to maybe catch both of you. But did she see you leave? Thomas looked up, terror in his eyes. No. That's impossible. Allison would never... But there was no more confidence in his voice. Monica could see memories flashing through his mind as he mentally searched through the moments, looking for confirmation or denial of her words. Talk to your daughter, Thomas, and be prepared for another conversation with me. Monica left him on the bench, staring after the departing figure with the expression of a man with the ground shifting out from under his feet. Sarah Kelly, the 13-year-old daughter of Thomas and Allison, was a serious teenager with delicate features and attentive eyes. She was sitting on a swing in the schoolyard when Monica approached her. Detective Baxter, Sarah nodded, not seeming surprised. You're here about Veronica Higgs, aren't you? Monica sat down on a nearby swing. You knew her? Sarah shrugged her shoulders. Everyone knew Veronica. She worked at the Bluebird, always gave me an extra scoop of whipped cream for my hot chocolate. There was no warmth in her voice, more of an aloofness, as if she were talking about someone she barely knew. But Monica sensed it was only a protective mask. Did you know about her and your father? Sarah was silent, swinging on the swing. I saw them together, about 3 months ago. They were in the park, holding hands when they thought no one could see them. Did you tell your mom? Sarah froze, gripping the swing's chains tightly. I wanted to, but then I saw Mom crying in the kitchen at night. She thought I was asleep, but I came down for a drink of water, and I realized that she already knew. Just doesn't want to say it out loud. Monica nodded. Sometimes the knowledge was too heavy a burden to admit its existence. What do you think about your father's plans to leave with Veronica? Sarah turned sharply toward her, tears glistening in her eyes. He was going to take me with him. He promised we'd start a new life, that he wouldn't abandon me like his father had abandoned him. Monica was stunned. This was a new twist that neither Thomas nor anyone else had mentioned. When did he tell you that? Last Friday, Sarah sobbed. We were sitting in his car outside the school. He said that things were going to change soon, that we were going to go to a big city by the ocean. I asked about my mom, and he just didn't say anything. Something inside Monica clenched. Whatever the truth was, there was already too much pain and heartbreak in this story. The night shrouded the Boathouse Motel in cool September darkness. In room 3, the lights were dimmed. Veronica Higgs sat on the edge of the bed, glancing nervously at her watch. On the table next to her stood an open bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, one empty, one half full. A small suitcase of belongings lay next to it. She flinched when she heard a knock on the door. Tomasa was back after all. She was sure he wouldn't leave her. "Who's there?" she asked playfully, approaching the door. There was no answer, just another quiet knock. Veronica hesitated a moment, then turned the lock and opened the door ajar. A shadowy figure stepped inside before Veronica could say anything. There was silence for a moment. The 2 figures stood opposite each other, separated not only by physical space, but by years of unspoken pain, disappointment, and betrayal. "What are you doing here?" Veronica finally exhaled, stepping back. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize? Where's your hubby?" The voice was quiet, but you could hear the steel in it. Veronica grinned nervously, trying to keep her composure. "It's inevitable. We love each other. It's best to accept that and move on." "Move on?" The figure in the shadows took another step forward. Veronica reached for her glass, took a sip of champagne. "You know this marriage has been dead for a long time. We're just giving everyone a chance at happiness." "Happiness?" The laugh was as bitter as wormwood. "You talk about happiness by ruining people's lives?" Veronica shook his head. "You've ruined your own lives, and we're just trying to build something new out of the rubble. With my money." Her voice shook with rage. "That's enough!" Veronica raised her voice. "It's already decided. We're leaving, and no one you hear, no one will stop us." Something in those words was the last straw. The figure in the shadows rushed forward. Veronica screamed, recoiling and dropping her glass. The glass shattered, champagne spilled across the floor. In desperation, Veronica tried to reach for the phone, but her hand only caught the desk lamp. The lamp toppled over but didn't fall. "Please," she pleaded, retreating to the window. "Let's talk. We can work this out." But it was too late for talking. Darkness seemed to thicken in the room, swallowing up light and hope. The silhouette rushed forward, grabbed the heavy lamp and brought it down on Veronica's head with all its might. The sound of impact was dull, wet. Veronica fell without making a sound. Blood spread rapidly across the white carpet like a scarlet flower blooming in slow motion. The silhouette of the assassin froze over the body, breathing heavily. The seconds stretched into eternity. Then the figure lowered the lamp, leaving it next to the lifeless body, and stepped back into the shadows. The room door closed quietly, leaving Veronica Higgs alone with silence and death. Outside the motel window, the wind moved the branches of the trees, indifferent to human tragedy, and the clouds covered the stars like a curtain at the end of a heartbreaking play. The school hallway buzzed with the noise of recess. Teenagers crowded around lockers, laughing loudly, sharing the latest news. Maggie Donovan, a slender, red-haired girl with a scattering of freckles on her nose, stopped at Sarah Kelly's locker. Noticing that she was sitting on the floor with her hands on her knees, her eyes wide with a blank stare. "Hey, are you okay?" Maggie asked, squatting down next to her. Sarah slowly raised her head. Her eyes were red from crying, and her cheeks showed trails of mascara. "Everyone knows, don't they?" she asked quietly. "About her father and that woman." Maggie nodded hesitantly. Over the past 2 days, the story of Veronica Higgs and her murder had become a major topic of conversation, not only among the adults but among Millview's teenagers as well. "I'm sorry," Maggie said, "but no one's blaming you or your ma. Mom did what she had to do," Sarah suddenly blurted out, her voice shaking with emotion. "She finally stood up for herself. Do you know how many years she put up with it? How many women her father had had?" Maggie recoiled, shocked by the sudden outburst. "Sarah, what are you saying?" Sarah came to her senses, her eyes wide and her hand to her mouth, as if trying to get the words back out. "Nothing," she whispered. "I didn't say anything." But it was too late. In the silence that had suddenly fallen around them, every word rang out with frightening clarity. And among the unwilling witnesses was Jason Baxter, Monica's son, who had already pulled out his cell phone to call his mother. Monica Baxter stood at the blackboard with photos and notes, constructing a timeline of events and connections between the evidence. Each new piece of the puzzle confirmed her suspicions, but she needed one last piece of evidence to close the case. A phone call from her son made her freeze. Sarah's words, relayed by Jason, were practically a confession. But it wasn't enough. She needed to hear the truth from Allison herself. Before going to see the suspect, however, Monica decided to visit another man who she felt knew more than he was telling. Doug Simmons was sitting in his office at the auto repair shop, looking at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. When he heard the knock on the door, he didn't look up, as if he already knew who had come and why. "Stop playing hide and seek, Doug," Monica said, closing the door behind her. "I know you're hiding something." Doug looked up at her tiredly. It was as if he had aged 10 years in the last 2 days. The deep wrinkles on his forehead were sharper, his shoulders slumped even lower. "I've lived in this town all my life, Monica," he began quietly. "Knew Thomas from junior high school. Saw how he met Allison, how they fell in love, and saw that love die slowly, painfully, year after year." Monica sat across from him, turning on the recorder on her phone. "Tell me about the night of the murder, Doug." He took a deep breath, as if gathering his strength to dive into the icy water. "It was about midnight. I was at home watching an old Western. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Allison was there, shaking, eyes wild, blood on her jacket. Doug rubbed his face with his palms. She couldn't talk coherently. She just sobbed and kept saying, "I killed her, Doug, I killed her." Monica tensed inwardly, but kept her outward composure. "What did you do? What could I have done?" "I dragged her inside before anyone saw her. I made her drink whiskey to calm her down. She didn't tell me the details. She just said she'd caught Veronica at the motel, they'd had a fight, and..." He paused. "Allison's not a killer, Monica. She's a good woman who's endured too much pain for too long." Monica was silent, giving him a chance to continue. "Thomas cheated on her for years." Doug spoke again. "First, it was just casual flings. Then, Veronica came along and things got serious. I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. He said he deserved to be happy, that he was tired of being in debt and fighting." "What did you do after Allison confessed?" Doug lowered his eyes. "I took her jacket with the blood on it, burned it in a barrel behind the garage, took her home and made her shower, clean herself up. Said if she kept quiet, maybe no one would ever find out." Monica nodded. A lot of things were becoming clear now. The lack of trace evidence, the altered testimony, the attempt to create an alibi. "Do you realize you've become an accessory to murder, Doug?" He smiled sadly. "You know, Monica, sometimes in life you have to choose between what's right according to the law and what's right according to your conscience. I'm guilty, but I'd do it again." Monica turned off the recorder, looking at the broken man in front of her. She could arrest him right now, but decided she wanted to hear the full story from Allison first. "I'll be right back with a warrant, Doug. Don't go anywhere." He nodded, knowing there was no point in running. Allison Kelly was sitting on the porch of her house when Monica pulled up. It was as if she had been waiting for her, resigned to the inevitable. In her hands, she held a child's drawing, a bright, inept sketch of a happy family against the backdrop of a house with a smoking chimney. Monica sat down beside her on the porch steps. They were silent for a while, looking out at the deserted street. "Sarah drew this when she was 6, Allison finally said, showing her the drawing. "We were still happy then, or so I thought." "Doug told me everything, Allison," Monica said quietly. "I know it was you who killed Veronica." Allison nodded slowly, as if surrendering to something inevitable. "I didn't plan it." Her voice sounded detached, like she was telling someone else's story. "I'd suspected for a long time that Thomas had someone. I'd heard the whispers behind me, noticed the way he hid his phone when I came into the room." Monica pulled out a voice recorder and turned it on. Allison didn't even look at the device, as if it no longer mattered to her what remained on the tape. That night, Thomas said he was going to be late for work. I knew he was lying. Doug had already closed the service. I told Sarah, said I'd spend the night at a friend's house. Then I got in my car and followed him. Allison spoke smoothly, unemotional, as if what had happened had not happened to her, but to some other woman. I saw his car outside the motel. I parked a little farther away and just sat there, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to barge in and make a scene. The other part of me wanted to just drive away and forget the whole thing, pretend I hadn't seen anything. Monica listened without interrupting, realizing that for Allison, this was the moment of confession she needed. I sat in the car for maybe an hour, saw Thomas leaving the room, slamming the door. He looked pissed. He drove off without even noticing my car. Allison grinned bitterly. I thought it was my chance to talk to her to find out the truth, maybe beg her to leave my family alone. Allison's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained strangely calm. I knocked on the door. She opened it. She was surprised, but not scared. She invited me in, as if she'd been expecting me. There was an open bottle of champagne in the room, and a suitcase. Monica nodded, remembering Thomas's testimony about the escape plans. We talked almost calmly at first. She told me that she and Thomas loved each other, that they were going away together, said that Thomas and I have been unhappy for a long time, that I should let him go. Allison clutched the drawing in her hands so hard that the paper crumpled. Allison's face contorted with the pain of the memory. She was laughing, saying I was a loser, that I sucked the life out of Thomas, that I didn't deserve him or Sarah. Monica frowned. She said, "He chose me, you lost." Allison's voice shook. Something inside me broke. Monica, 15 years of patience, of hope, of forgiveness. 15 years of turning a blind eye to his cheating, of believing his promises to change, for Sarah's sake, for my family's sake. And all the while he planned to leave me, as it turned out later to take my daughter, the only thing I had left. Allison finally looked directly at Monica, her eyes dry and strangely bright. I don't remember grabbing the lamp, I only remember the sound. And the blood. So much blood. She fell silent, lowering her gaze again to the crumpled drawing. What happened next? Monica asked quietly. I sat next to her for I don't know how long. I couldn't believe I'd done it. Then the horror came. I ran to the car, drove to Doug's. He was always there for us when we were in trouble. By my side when Thomas wasn't. She shook her head. But I didn't think I'd ruin his life with it too. Monica turned off the recorder and was silent for a while, digesting what she had heard. Allison's story was the story of so many women cornered by circumstance, betrayal, despair. I'm sorry, Allison, she finally said, standing up. But I have to arrest you for the murder of Veronica Higgs. Allison rose slowly, not resisting as Monica handcuffed her. Take care of Sarah, please, she asked quietly. She didn't deserve any of this. As Monica led Allison to the police car, an elderly woman stood on the porch of a neighboring house, sadly watching the scene. The news would spread through the city in minutes, becoming a new legend, a new story to retell on long winter evenings. Thomas Kelly returned home late that night. The house greeted him with silence and emptiness. On the kitchen table lay a note from Sarah. I'm at Aunt Carol's, don't call me. He slowly lowered himself into a chair, looking around the familiar space that had suddenly become alien. The family photos on the walls, Sarah's childhood drawings on the refrigerator, the tattered plaid on the couch all, were part of the life he had so carelessly destroyed. Thomas pulled an envelope out of his pocket, the money he'd been saving for a rainy day for years. The very money that was meant for an escape with Veronica, for a new life by the ocean. Now they seemed like useless paper junk. He remembered Doug's words to him before his arrest. You thought about freedom, Thomas, but you didn't think about the price you'd have to pay. And now that price is being paid by everyone but you. Thomas covered his face with his hands, and for the first time in years allowed himself to truly cry. Not from self-pity, but from the realization of the irreparability of what he had done. He had lost everything. His wife, his daughter, his mistress, his friend. And worst of all was the realization that it was all his fault. Outside the windows of his house, the town of Millview continued to live its leisurely life. Old men on benches discussed the latest news. Teenagers dreamed of escaping to the big cities. Women in the supermarket whispered about other people's secrets. And the tragedy of the Kelly family gradually became just another story. Dark, cautionary, but already detached from the real pain of real people. At the police station, Monica Baxter was closing the Veronica Higgs murder case, neatly folding the latest reports into a folder. Evidence had been collected, a confession had been obtained, justice had been served. At least, that's the way it was supposed to be. But deep down inside, Monica knew that there was no real justice here, and there couldn't be. There were only broken hearts, ruined lives, and the phantom hope that someday the wounds would heal. And perhaps the worst part was the realization that there were no real villains in this story, only people making terrible mistakes in search of simple human happiness.